Hello, my name is Bob Goodykunst, a pastor in the Penn Northeast Conference of the United Church of Christ. And welcome to How to Church, I Wish I Knew, a series of video conversations dealing with various aspects of congregational life. In this time of rapid change in the life of the church, we hope that this video series will serve as a resource for pastors, for congregations at large, and for individual church-going members, exploring and reflecting upon and hopefully offering some options, alternatives, and solutions for the many difficulties and opportunities that we're faced with in this present time and that are part and parcel of living together as communities of faith. This series of conversations is a joint project of the local congregational support and congregational vitality teams of the Penn Northeast Conference. Serving as our moderator for this series of conversations is the Reverend Dr. Matthew Gorkas, the pastor of Church of the Good Shepherd in Albertus, PA, and author of The Story Church, a strategy for congregational renewal. The first video will be a conversation centered around the question, how to be a good consistory or church council member. What are some of the roles and responsibilities, the challenges and the joys, the questions that one might have when considering serving the church in this particular capacity? Joining our moderator, Matt, for this roundtable discussion today will be the Reverend Dr. Becky Beckwith, Pastor Emerita of St. John's United Church of Christ in Fullerton, Pennsylvania, and Lori Balliott from St. Paul's in Northampton, who has served as consistory president, other roles within the church, and also the assistant moderator of the conference. So without further ado, let us discover how to church.
Well, I want to start by thanking both of you for being willing to join me for this conversation, Lori and Becky, for being here. I'm excited to talk to you both about this because I think we each come to this question bringing a different perspective based on our own experiences of congregational life. Myself, I was raised in the church, but entered ministry right out of college, and so I've never technically or officially served on a consistory. Whereas I know, Lori, you've been involved in church leadership and on consistory and consistory president as a lay person, and now entered in serving as a lay leader in conference level stuff.
Right.
And Becky, you've gotten to experience both sides of this coin, having been a lay leader before hearing the call into ministry and then making the jump into pastoral leadership. And so having seen this from both perspectives, I'm excited to hear how those perspectives help us each bring some wisdom to these questions about being a good consistory or council person. So I want to begin with what I think is probably the most obvious question, because it's, I think, the fear that I hear the most from people who are either on consistory or thinking about whether they want to be part of church leadership. And that is the question of, does this mean I'm going to be expected to do more stuff? And the short answer is yeah. Yes, you are. But I want to ask each of you, what do you see as some of the intangible benefits to the church of expecting more from your leader, of expecting greater attendance and increased participation and involvement from those people in that role?
So first of all, you get a continuity of being there every week or almost every week. You know what's going on. You just have a greater feel of the life of the church. So I think that's important. The other thing is, one, you do make more friends and you become closer with certain people because you are working with them through thick and through thin. The other thing that I see as important is, now, I was at a church and twice we had ministers that retired after long-term ministries. And the first time, I wasn't on Consistory at that point, I had previously been on, and the Consistory president said, we're not going to do anything until we get our called pastor again. Well, that lasted about a couple months because the church needs to be able to continue doing what it should be doing. And you need strong lay leadership. You need strong members to keep a church going. No offense to any pastors, but the pastors will come and go, but the church is what is remaining. And you need people there to know how to run a church and to keep it going from all those different perspectives.
And I believe it's such an honor and privilege to be invited to be a leader of your church and to serve on consistory. Will that involve more work? Yes. But does it have to be work? Or can it be something that you enjoy doing? It's not like your job where there's must-dos. And so I think that as a leader, you play to your strengths. What are you good at in the that you can bring to your church? Are you good at marketing at work? Maybe that's what you can bring, along with making sure you're there, present. That's so important that they're present. People get to know who the leaders are, and that the leaders know to reach out and talk to people, which is hard for some of us, but it's very easy for others. But we all are going to work a little harder, but it can be joyful work. It doesn't have to be, oh, now I have to do this. Because if it feels like you have to do it, then you're probably not the right person to be doing.
And just adding one point on there, you said about when you're there weekly, the other members now see you and know that, oh, I could go ask so-and-so about a problem or an issue I'm having. Maybe they don't want to ask the pastor, or, but they know, oh, Lori's there every week. I can go ask her, and she can either have the question or she'll find out, or if there's a problem.
And there's ways to be visible. Maybe you could read scripture and people will see you that way. Maybe that scares you to pieces, but maybe you are somebody that's going to help with the altar things, or the greeter, or an usher if you use ushers, or there's just so many different ways.
Oh, yeah.
You can be more visible, and I think that's great that people know who to go to, because they often don't.
Right.
Yeah, those are all great insights. And I think what I want to pull out of that jumps out to me are the way that presence and visibility and what they do for the rest of the congregation is, they demonstrate care on the part of those leaders.
Yeah.
Right? A leader who's absent all the time, you wonder how much they care. But a leader who is present and involved and visible, you know that they care, you know that they're passionate about the church, and that builds trust.
Right.
And that's essential in any kind of leadership, especially when you're the one that people are trusting to make some decisions for the church then, that you need to establish that trust with the rest of the congregation, and you can only do that by being there and being involved. And I think so that's good. I want to then jump to the decision-making piece of this, which is another part of church leadership and being part of the consistory or council, are the decision-making business side of the congregation's life. And that's a side of church leadership that can be daunting and contentious and scary, especially if you're getting caught up in meetings that are poorly organized or they last way too long. So what tips do you have for helping to avoid meetings that feel like a burden rather than meetings that feel productive? What are ways that you have found to help that business side of things go more smoothly and more efficiently?
Well, one of the things is there are different modules for governance. One of them has advanced reports that go out a couple days in advance so that people can read them. And if no action needs to be taken, you don't even have to discuss them. You just note that, yes, we got the advanced reports. Also, you need to make sure that whoever is running the meeting is organized and has the agenda set, the questions set, what do we need to do, and continue that way. It's also important to modulate the amount of time people are taking. So there are some people that do like to talk a lot and will go off on tangents. And in a tactful way, you need to say, okay, let's hear another point of view, and then call out somebody else who has been very quiet but may have something to say. And you don't want a meeting that just rubber stamps everything. You want people to voice their opinion in a nice way. And I know a couple of times I've talked to people on the side saying, that was a little bit rude, watch your tone next time. And we're all just trying here. We're not professionals, if you will. We're not on the Senate. We're just trying to do this and help the church.
Mm-hmm.
Just maybe to add on to that, I think of micromanaging. So many consistories and councils want to have committees doing the work of the committee, and yet turn around to want to micromanage. For instance, maybe you need a new boiler in the church, and the property committee's been working on that, and they come up with a suggestion, and all of a sudden the consistory has it. Well, did you know Jack does, or did you? Instead of looking at the work that the committee has done, they have a lot of additional things. A suggestion would be, if you really do care about that boiler, go to that meeting. As a council member, you're usually welcome at all the meetings. Go there and share your input there. So then when a suggestion comes from a different committee, it's usually respected. And I mean, if it's off the wall, of course you mention it, but otherwise you pretty much take their suggestion. They've done some work on that. So consistories and councils need to value the work of the committee.
Absolutely.
So that we have more and more people involved instead of less.
Yeah, I think from a perspective of a pastor who's always not in charge of these meetings, but present at them, the thing that can be frustrating to me is when everybody seems to be hearing about everything for the first time that night in the moment. Because you haven't had time to process anything, and so you're taking time to process things that you should already have had some ideas in mind. And that can be frustrating because that's one of the things that adds lots of time then to those meetings. And so I think the advanced reports and being in communication with the committees and what the committees are doing, basically doing work between your meetings is an essential part to then the meetings not being as much of a burden to get through as they are when you're not prepared or when you haven't done any of that work and everything is new that night. And so, I think that's a good, and I like your point about tone and the way that we speak to each other in the meetings as well, and being able to disagree in healthy ways. I think that's a really essential thing, and certainly is something that just as people we're all trying to get better at all the time.
And I had one person, and he was a great guy. He would bring up the opposite point for everything. And he did it on purpose in a nice way. He's just like, but we need to see the other side just so that we didn't rubber stamp anything. And we could say, yeah, we looked at all the sides and it was important. And so we knew every time he was going to bring up the opposite point, and he did it nicely and we had a great time with it. So it is important to hear from everyone.
Yeah. And so to get to our next question here, I want to build off of that kind of tone piece of it and link back to sort of that first question that we talked about where the leaders can be an example of participation, of involvement. I tend to think of our church leadership as also helping set the tone for just the atmosphere of congregational life, as what it's like when we are together, of the ways that we talk and we worship and we minister and we fellowship together. I think as a church leader, there's often a real opportunity to help be a positive influence on the community itself. And so I want to know, where in your experiences of congregational life have you seen, or do you see, leaders serving the church in that way and adding that positivity to to the life of their congregation.
Yeah, I agree that the tone is very important, and you want to be serious, but it's nice if you have a certain amount of levity when you are either at the meetings or congregational meetings. You have some serious matters, but it doesn't all have to be doom and gloom. There can be laughter in there. With our consistory meetings, there was a lot of laughter going on, and I was saying that as far as when the meeting would end, people would hang around just because they wanted to talk to each other. So you were trying to enable that sense of friendship and foster that part with each other.
In my own belief, I just feel so often God looks at us and just shakes his head. Like, silly, silly people. This is about joy. This is about love. This is about community. This is about coming together. And there should be laughter so that when we have the difficult times, we've built a relationship. But there should always be laughter and joy and checking in and getting to know each other in ways that build a relationship for whatever's to come. And we never know when, God forbid, lightning might strike or something might happen, and we're going to have to come together and figure it out. So when those times are stressful, we've already built something, and that has huge impact. And I just can't say enough about respecting people's time. That's what we hear all the, I'm too busy, I'm too busy, I'm too busy. Well, we all are. So when we say we're going to have a meeting until a certain time, it ends at that time. We'll finish it up later, and to remember not to take ourselves so serious, to think it's not going to matter if the bulletins are bought or printed. I mean, in the end of the world, it's not going to matter. And so we can all go home at a decent time and make the decision the next time we get together. So we have to really look at what's important and not spend time on what's not as important.
Yeah, I love that idea of that this should be joyful. Because I keep thinking about, and I hear this from churches all the time, lots of churches, how do we get more people to want to be on consistory? And I think to myself, well, if being on consistory is something that we've learned to see as joyful and exciting and hopeful work, people will want to do it. If being on consistory is miserable and dreadful and such a burden, well, who would want to sign up for that? So I think that idea of approaching this role from the point of trying to be positive and joyful and excited about the opportunity that you have to serve the church goes a long way, not just into your own experience of it, but to inspiring others to want to do it too. And I think that's the cycle of church leadership, is you always want somebody else to be ready to step in and serve next. And by inspiring people through our own joy, it's such a great way to then have somebody else ready when their time comes.
Right.
It goes back to being asked to be a church leader should be an honor and a privilege. Even if you aren't able to do it, you should feel good about having been asked. It matters. I think of this woman who was complaining to me about having taught kindergarten for 30 years. I'm so tired of it. Then I went, quit, please quit. Because she wasn't doing it with joy anymore. And she needed to find something to do with joy. And so if it feels burdensome, it's not helping you to grow in faith.
Right.
And we all want to be growing in our faith. And we want to see faithful leaders.
Yeah. Well, this was wonderful. Thank you all again for being here, and thank you to all for watching. And hopefully you got something out of us. I think if we boil it down, right, how to be a good church leader, how to be a good church consistory council member. 3 things, I think: being present, and being prepared, and then being positive. I think the practical aspects of what exactly the job entails and what different things you'll have to do changes based on what church you're in. But I think those three principles are pretty consistent tips for how to go about doing this and doing well for yourself and for your congregation. So thank you all again.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Matt.
Thank you.